Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Scott Jones. Jones is Thirsty. You're here for our virtual wine tasting. I'm excited to have y'all here for this Everything's Coming Up Roses event. This is, as I've been saying the last week or so, it wasn't just by popular demand. I think people were insisting that we cover the topic of rosé. I was really kind of blown away by the number of folks that are very passionate about rosé. I do want to say up front that we have a record crowd tonight. Honestly, we'll probably have in total more than 150 people on tonight. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's participating. I can't tell you how much this means to me and how much I appreciate the support through this whole kind of COVID virtual wine tasting test that many of you launched with me 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, and here we are in May with we'll have almost like I said 150, 160 people on. So this is it's pretty cool. It's great. So the other thing is I know I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but we have folks from all over the country. Literally 2 weeks ago, we had a couple from India that dialed in, but we have folks from the West Coast, the East Coast, the North, the South. They're from all over. So hello to everyone. We have even more folks signing on now. If you haven't opened your wine, which you're probably at the wrong tasting if your wine's not open yet, but just want to again raise a glass to everyone and say welcome. And I'll go right ahead up front and say that the other reason I know that there's people from all over the country is because you guys have been emailing me about the rosés that are available in your market. When I first set the agenda and the schedule for these tastings, I really thought it would be kind of regional. I didn't really expect that it would expand as far wide as it has. And so I know that many of you have reached out and said that you have found rosés in your local markets that are a little bit different than the ones that I had originally recommended, which is cool. I've interacted with lots of you, and the focus of tonight's tasting is really about looking at these various styles. So as long as you are kind of in the ballpark, we are going to we're going to have fun. So we're going to look at one from Provence that's kind of in that style. We're going to look at one that's made with Pinot Noir, which is kind of an emerging grape in New Zealand in terms of rosé. And then we're going to look at one that's a little more kind of complex, I guess is what you would say, and more full-bodied from Spain. But I've also recommended you might have grabbed one from Italy. I know there are people that have examples from South Africa. We've got them from all over, which is really cool. So what I was going to say is I really want to encourage all of you to share with all of us the wines that you're drinking, because we want to know where they're from, what varietals are being used. And if you have any questions relative to your wines, please ask. So I hope you have poured that glass, because I do want to introduce our guests for this evening. As you know, we have a special guest that joins me to illuminate the tasting with more expertise and comments, and to pick up the slack when I'm dropping the ball. And tonight, I'm really excited to have a friend of mine, Wendy Watts. And Wendy has been a fixture in the Birmingham wine community for many years. She has, I first met Wendy when I was buying wine at a wine shop that was in a grocery store, but it was a really phenomenal wine program. And I was always impressed by Wendy's customer service. She was very knowledgeable. She was incredibly helpful, was so quick to help you find something. And I always appreciated that. And now Wendy is managing a terrific wine shop here in Birmingham called Finch Fine Wine. So welcome, Wendy. Glad to have you tonight.
Thank you very much. And I just realized that I am at my boyfriend's using his computer, and that I realized his name is under my face. So I am not Terry Beckham. I don't know if you can change that from your end, but I even logged in through my email and
no. Listen, anyway. It adds more color to the evening if you're operating under an alias. Everybody's got a story, Wendy. Don't sweat it. We've all got issues.
So my prison break won't come up, right?
That's right. Yeah. Don't listen. Don't worry about it. Jill, thanks. I see you're just said hello from Chicago. Man, great to have you. We had a group of folks from Maryland a couple of weeks ago. I think a bunch of them are back on. I know we've got some folks from the Bay Area that have dialed in. So it's really cool. You know, I know we've got folks from Texas and Louisiana. We've got folks from up in the Northeast. So lots of friends here tonight to enjoy wine. For those of you who, we've got Kylie from Philly. Welcome. For those of you who are first timers, I know there have to be some first timers on here. I do want to quickly run through a few housekeeping items. So I'm going to share my screen again real quick, and we'll just kind of run through those. Let me get to that slide, if I can get there. So you guys are already doing this to at least mute your audio. One thing that we're going to do tonight that we haven't done in the past is I'm going to let everybody be adults. I'm going to trust that you're going to allow the relaxation and the mood enhancing components of the wine to wash over you. And I want you to unmute yourself when you want to speak. I'm not going to go through the because there's so many people on tonight. I just can't see everybody who's raising their hands. So just keep your audio muted while you're not speaking. But when you want to offer up a comment, ask a question, just unmute yourself and jump in. That's the best way it's going to work, and we'll keep it kind of moving along. I say this every time, but if you have a sheet of white paper, it's always good to have so we can look at the wines together. We have some very different colors and some different things happening in the wine glasses tonight. So it's not a requirement, but it always helps. We have the group chat going tonight. Hey, from Nashville, good to see you. And group chat is always a great way. I have it on like 120 point type. So even without my glasses on, I think I can make out the comments. More people saying hello from Nashville, which is really cool. And then as always, as all of you who have joined, you know that every single virtual wine event has a charitable partner. And it's why we do these things. And tonight, I'm really thrilled to have, to be able to come alongside and support Smile a Mile. And we're gonna tell you a little bit more about that. We have the director here who's gonna tell you about some of the really amazing things that, hey Bruce, how you doing?
They're doing great, Scott.
They're doing. And you know, for those of you who have been along for this ride over the last couple of months, we've helped raise money for Hope for Autumn Foundation, which is a pediatric cancer foundation. We've helped raise money for Open Hands Overflowing Hearts, which is another pediatric cancer foundation. Well, a lot of those efforts kind of roll up into what Smile a Mile does. And so, Bruce, if you're willing, if you might just say a few words about some of the really amazing things that you guys are doing through your efforts to help some of these families in in kids with cancer.
Absolutely. Thank you, Scott. First of all, for choosing us tonight. We very much appreciate being the benefiting organization. We are Smile a Mile. We are Alabama's program for children with cancer. We've been around for 35 years, and our mission, in a nutshell, is to provide hope, healing of the spirit, and love to kids going through the pediatric cancer journey, their siblings, and their entire family. And, you know, the thing I would say right now, as all of us go through this pandemic, is that we are experiencing just a little bit of the isolation and the fear that these families face all the time. You know, so I want us to keep that in mind. We actually, the timing of this is great. We typically do 7 physical camp sessions in the summer, but we are doing virtual camp, and that starts in 2 weeks for kids between 6 and 12. We are sending out Camp in a Box to more than 75 kids and their siblings. That will have everything in it, from art canvases to hammocks, believe it or not. So, you know, about a $200 value in each of those kits that are going out. And we'll be doing both live and recorded programming during the week, just to give those kids and their families a little bit of respite. And the thing that we have been saying all through this is hope is never canceled. So I say that to all of you as well. Thank you, Scott, and thank you all in advance so much for your generosity tonight. We're glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I'm telling you, I've had a chance to interact with some of the kids that have gone to that camp, that both as campers and as kids that have and volunteers who have been part of that. It's incredible. I've donated wine events to your Red Nose Ball, which is always a lot of fun, doing some great things. And so anyway, glad y'all can be here. Sit back. We're going to enjoy some wine. And also, if you're, I've already seen some shots of some of the spreads that are going on on patios and kitchens and dining rooms and all sorts of places all over, where people have got charcuterie and some nibbles alongside their wine. So if you have, if you're willing to maybe share some of those on Instagram, that would be awesome. You know, I'm at Jones is Thirsty, and you can you know, tag Jones is Thirsty and use that hashtag. I'd love to see what you're doing. And then back to Smile a Mile. The Venmo that we always use is Jones is Thirsty, and so we'll collect all those tips from the virtual tip jar at the end of the evening, and then pass that along to Bruce and his team on Monday morning. So thank you in advance for that. So we have plenty of time to discuss the wines tonight and ask questions, but I think it's time to go ahead and dive right into our first wine and learn a little bit about the basics of rosé. What do you think about that? Wendy, are you armed with your first wine?
I am armed. I like that.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and taste through that, and then we'll maybe I'll say a few words about some of the kind of high level 101 wines. So this wine, we started with all of these wines. We'll start with the Côte de Rose, and then we'll go to the Pinot Noir, and then we'll end with the Garnacha. But I'm assuming that for those of you who can see the slide, you'll see some basic information. But while you're looking at this wine and you're kind of taking in some of the aromas and taking a taste, go ahead and be thinking about how this might be made relative to, say, that Spanish wine that's sitting there that's a little bit darker. And I'll explain how that happens. But while we're talking about this wine, be thinking about how this one fits into this paradigm of how rosé is made. This first wine is very much in the traditional Provençal style, and it's from the Languedoc. The producer is one of my favorite wine producers in the business right now, Gerard Bertrand. If you guys have followed Jones is Thirsty for any length of time, you know that I can't say enough about his wines. It's, for the most part, it's biodynamically farmed. It's all, organic. This guy is all about being a good steward of the land and making amazing wines. And, I've talked about what a fan I am of great values in Washington State. When people are coming to me for, wine recommendations, this is one of the French wines that I send them to, are wines from Gerard Bertrand, whether it's his red blends, his white blends, whether it's this rosé. The guy, you may not love every wine, but I'm going to tell you, they're all high quality, great value wines that are made with a lot of love and care. So this is his rosé, and go ahead and put your nose in the glass if you haven't already. Take a big, couple of good sniffs. I mean, I get a lot of that really bright fruit, some strawberries, maybe some raspberries, maybe to me like a little bit of floral, like a rose petal almost. What about you, Wendy? I mean, I really just get this freshness.
It's the one out of the three, it's the one that just sort of dances out of the glass. It's fresh and lively, and it's elegant at the same time. It's that perfect color that is just the sort of a very Provençal, even though we're in the Languedoc, but very pale salmon. It's beautiful and light on the palate. It's almost floral more than it is fruit, although I agree with that little bit of raspberry or a little bit of...
Yeah, so everyone go ahead and take a nice little swig of it. I know you've had a sip, but take a sip and feel that acidity. Your mouth is watering. But to me, what's really cool about these rosés, even in this really delicate style, is I can feel that roundness on my palate that is definitely not white wine. You're not getting a lot of tannins, but there's definitely, because it has some skin contact with during that vinification process, you get some of that you just feel it on your tongue. It's got a medium body, but it's nice and dry. For those of you who are new to rosé, you might be shocked by how dry it is, but you can, on the palate, it's dry, but it has this really wonderful juiciness to it. I mean, this is the kind of, wine, I guess, if I were in a old, French black and white movie driving my convertible down along the Mediterranean, I wouldn't be drinking and driving drinking this, but I would be headed to a cafe that was seaside where I might enjoy some of this, right, Wendy? I mean, that's kind of in that style.
I was just thinking it almost has a little prickle of acidity. Yeah, not absolutely, but just that little bit of dance in there that's really pretty. And by the way, you said this is his rosé. I should have looked up information on Bertrand long ago, but he does so many different properties. He has 12 rosés. Yeah, which is truly amazing. And maybe the group here tonight will be interested that he was a rugby star. Yes. When he was in college. And so his father had bought a winery when he was a kid, and he spent time in the winery learning. And then he started playing rugby, but it doesn't pay any money, or not then anyway. So he's getting more and more learned. And then his father died. So all of a sudden he was plunged into the family business. He said 20 years that it was a struggle, but then he went up, and they are extremely successful now. So yeah, he's a great dude. I mean, I'm telling you, it's I know we don't really all need to geek out on the wine piece, but if you want to kind of go 2 or 3 layers deeper on learning a little bit about some winemakers, I know Wine Spectator, I saw on Instagram today, of all places,
Wine Spectator is doing a big blowout feature on him. But he's really worth visiting his website. And I'm telling you, his wines, again, from reds to whites to his rosés, he is really one of my favorite winemakers in the business now. And for those of you who have been on past tastings, you know we've looked at Rhone blends, and these grapes are the grapes that are found, those red grapes that are traditionally found in those Rhone blends, Grenache, Syrah, Cinsault. So these are both, oh, sorry, Doug. We are doing the Côte de Rose right now in the really cool, funky bottle with the rose on the bottom. Is that, you guys have that one? I'm sorry, I should have been more specific. I just assumed that you guys were inside my head. There you go.
There you
go.
go.
And there's actually a really great story about that bottle. And I know that anytime that I've served that, people clamor to get the leftover bottle. And I'm looking at some of the comments on the messages right now about how they're great for decanting bourbon later on. They're great for using as water little holders at, at a dinner party. Yeah. They're just a great bottle. But he actually, there's a fine arts college in Paris, the École Boulle, and it's part of the Pratt Institute, but it's a fine arts college there. And when he was coming out with this line of wines, he had a contest, and a student designed this bottle. And that's if you pick up and look at the bottom, it's it's a rose. It's just a beautiful bottle, and it's got that really cool synthetic closure on the top. And this is just part of, I guess, without getting too cheesy, it's just part of his whole aesthetic. I mean, he's celebrating, all those things. But the grapes that are in here are, and as Wendy pointed out, even though this is from the Languedoc, and I'll show you, we're not going to spend a lot of time on maps, but I'm all about context, especially for those of you who might be new to the Languedoc and French wines. But you can see that down here in the kind of lower part of France is the Languedoc-Roussillon. And this is an important viticultural area, mainly because historically, this area was charged with producing it produces more wine than all of the other regions of France combined. But most of it was bulk wine. It wasn't really thought of as a place where fine wine was made. But that's all changing now. In the last couple of decades, people like Gerard Bertrand have come in and really upped their game. But you can see that it's right down here at the south. It borders Spain, and then it really kind of starts to hug going toward the east. It just runs the Mediterranean coast, and you can see here, there's Provence a little further east. Here's the Rhone. So, there's still a little bit of distance between them, but it's still that same kind of climate. So it's still perfect for growing those kind of Rhone, Provençal grapes. So you see Syrah and Grenache in red blends all the time, but in this area, you see them used in rosé. And I guess if anyone's paid any attention to the slide, would you want to guess? Anyone care to unmute themselves and guess which method is used for making this particular rosé? Come on now, don't be shy. There are more than 100 people on right now. Somebody take a guess.
Direct press.
Direct press. Ding, 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 ding. Very good. So this is in terms of the four primary methods of making rosé, this is perhaps the most classic and most elegant way of making rosé, which is the direct press. And this is indicative of Provençal. This is considered the most refined way of making rosé. And so what they do is they take what they call whole clusters. They take the whole, that whole cluster of grapes that haven't been crushed, and they put them in a vat, and they gently press them. And as the juice trickles down over the red grape skins, this beautiful, elegant, first run, beautiful, light, very, very light colored juice is produced. And the skin contact really is less than 2 hours. Sometimes it's even shorter than that. So what you get is just that light hue, because we all remember, hopefully, and for those of you who don't, the skins are the component of the grape that contains that pigment. They contain all the phenolic compounds, all of the antioxidants, but that's where the pigments are. That's where the tannins are. And so the red pigment in there is what is picked up. It gives that light color to the juice, but it retains that wonderful freshness and that very light color that's indicative of Provence. So this is what you get with direct press. And if you saw that slide at the very beginning that showed the various shades of rosé, this is definitely on the very light side. That doesn't always mean that it's going to be necessarily the lightest type of wine, but it will have the least amount of color. So any comments about what folks are thinking about this wine? For those of you who may be new to a style of rosé from Provence, anything?
I wanted to add one thing in before you move.
Yeah.
I've been playing with a book that I love, and I'll show it. It's called Rosé All Day, and
Yes.
it's written
Great book.
who writes for the Oregonian, but she's written 3 or 4 other books, most notably Voodoo Vintners, which is on the biodynamic movement in Oregon. But anyway, this is the coolest book, and here is a picture of the 12 different wines that they're trying to make. So anywhere from, it's supposedly very high, $4 signs. So Catherine gives a description of this exact wine.
Yeah.
She says, fresh and bright with a touch of spritz on the palate, this floral pink has a fresh spring, scrubbed clean character, washed over by sea foam and a hunger-inducing bitterness. The color is towards raspberry. That's very poetic.
It is very poetic, and it makes me, when I have this wine, I don't know what others are having with this wine, but when I have this wine, I mean, I think of like boiled shrimp, like oysters on the half shell, like shrimp with remoulade sauce, and this wine to me are wonderful, or like fresh crab. This is also really good with spicy Asian food, like something with chicken or shrimp. It just has that grapefruit, but that great acidity. And that color I kind of use for me when I'm pairing food to help direct me to the kind of that color of seafood. It's just delicious with that. What's anyone care to share what they're kind of enjoying or enjoyed alongside this rosé in terms of food, or what you'd like to have with this? Just hit the unmute button and fire away.
We had it with Korean tonight.
There you go. There you go. Care to elaborate? Was it barbecue? Was it noodles? Was it kimchi?
Was chicken and the bebop bam.
Yeah, sure.
And the noodles, all 3 things.
Yeah, fantastic.
Somebody
Good for
has
you.
some spicy smoked salmon.
Oh yeah, salmon in this would be. I see. Yeah, showing the platter. Very good. Very good.
Little crawfish pasta.
Oh yeah, Well, I mean, seriously, think about crawfish, the color of crawfish, that beautiful pink, and having that with pasta, maybe with a little cream in there. I mean, this is perfect. That acidity, the kind of natural sweetness of the grapes sounds like a fantastic pairing. Yeah, that's delicious. Yeah.
We had ours with a charcuterie board, a little
Yeah.
prosciutto, some Tome Green Hill, some brie type
Oh
cheeses,
gosh.
and some super side as well, a little fatty Italians
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
That's perfect. And Joe, I was thinking about especially that both of those cured meats. Also trying those alongside the Spanish one that we have, that Navarra one, because actually that rosé and a little bit of that salty charcuterie is also a really nice pair as well. Those are all great suggestions. Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, let's. Any more questions about? We'll come back to this during the Q&A, but I want to make sure that if there are any questions about this one, we get them answered. Otherwise, we'll move on to the Pinot Noir.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
This is Shelby here from Maryland. Hello.
Hey, Shelby. How are you doing?
You?
Good.
I have a related question, obviously. I'm a true Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc drinker,
Yeah.
and I always steer away from the rosés just because I love the Sauvignon Blanc.
Right.
I think one of the main reasons that I've always steered away from this rosé is because it reminds me of a white Zinfandel. And I have such a bad memory of white Zinfandel that I can't get that out of my head. Of course, I've already tried all three tonight, and I'm absolutely loving this Matua.
Yeah.
But can you tell me why these are different from the white Zinfandel? Yeah,
that's a great question, and I appreciate it. This Matua is they make lots of really wonderful wines, and Pinot Noir. Regardless of where you land in the discussion around global warming, Burgundy is getting warmer. Bordeaux's getting warmer. One of the world's emerging regions for really high quality Pinot Noir right now is New Zealand, and in fact we'll bump down here and I'll show you. This is the Marlborough region here. This is where those grapes come from. It's pretty chilly down there, but it's also a climate that's really well suited for Pinot Noir. And Shelby, to your question, and Wendy, you might speak to this, but
which one is it?
You'll see some iterations of rosé that are not necessarily rosé in the classic sense, but more like blush wines. But you'll see things like white Merlot, white Pinot Noir, and you, of course, white Zinfandel. And that white term typically refers to the fact that it's a singular varietal. So that means it's all Merlot, all Zinfandel, all Pinot Noir. Now, my experience with white Merlot, white Pinot Noir is that they do have a little bit of residual sugar. And I mean that different than fruitiness or fruit forward characteristics that you get from ripe fruit. I mean, they actually have some residual sugar. Now it's different than white Zinfandel, which, I don't want to disparage white Zinfandel because I know it's loved, and they're, the Trinchero family, their fine wines are built on the back of the sales of Sutter Home white Zinfandel.
Right.
But that wine is made like a white wine. That is a white, sweet, blush wine. And so Shelby, I understand where you're coming from. This example of a Pinot Noir rosé has, to me, the aroma is just like super aromatic. I mean, it kind of explodes out of the glass for me. And I know that may maybe make you wince from experience of white Zinfandel, but it's still relatively dry, but to me, Wendy, I would, get your opinion as well. But the aroma, the nose on this wine is really, I mean, it just explodes, and I get a lot of peach and watermelon. It's pretty aromatic for a rosé.
Well, and to be quite honest, maybe the last time I had white Zinfandel was when I was about 18. So,
Oh, so some good high quality underage drinking.
Yeah,
I got you.
We've
that's
come
good.
a long way since then.
Very good. Very
So.
good. Yeah.
Well, I have maybe a slightly different impression because I've been playing with this all along. And at first, you almost got more of an earthiness to it, maybe a little bit more out instead of fruit.
Yeah.
And where it's opened, I agree with Scott, it's gotten more jumping out of the glass, more to it. But I'm still getting more of a savory note rather than fruity, almost that little bit of tomato or V8 or something. So that stands out. I mean, it couldn't be any more different than the first one, which is excellent for a program like this. But
yeah,
get more savory. And by the way, for Shelby, I just wanted to say that that you already may know, but Trinchero's white Zinfandel was a mistake. Supposedly, he had a vat of what was going to be dry rosé, and he made a mistake and threw in some white juice, and the juice was sweet. And so what it did is stop the fermentation, and all of a sudden he had a vat of slightly blush colored, which he coined, I think, sweet juice. And he was like, well, what do I do with this now? And he said, I'll sell it. Having no idea that it was going to come, the big phenomenon in wine for a long time.
Yeah. And you know what, Wendy, I've heard that same story, and know that there's more fact to that than fiction. It was a Zinfandel where the fermentation was stuck, and they were dead broke and had all they could do was sell it. And it was a hit. And, like a lot of things, it started a revolution. I'm just looking at some of the comments now. Looks like we've got the Kennys are having the Kim Crawford Rosé, but again, same region. And I want to go back just for those of you who might at some point have to play Trivial Pursuit. But this is one of the things that, just want to impart a little bit of knowledge on you. But you'll notice that right over here in Gisborne, right at the very top of Gisborne is a viticultural area called Hicks Bay. And according to the wine world, Hicks Bay gets their grapes get the first sunlight every morning. That's where where our day starts in the Southern Hemisphere. And so the vineyards in Gisborne are famous. I mean, it's real cold there because it's right on the Pacific. But those are the grapes that get the first sunlight. So in case you're ever on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or the $25,000 pyramid, and they ask that question, there you go, right? For those of you who may be new to Pinot Noir, I'd love to get your thoughts on this wine, what you think about that, just the taste, the aromatics. To me, it's just, it's softer than the Provençal style. That I can feel it on my palate. The acidity is more mild to me. It's still crisp, but the acidity is different. So, like in my mind, as I'm thinking about food, it's a totally different type of group of food. But I'd love to hear if somebody is willing to unmute. I'd love to get some feedback on what y'all think, because this is definitely more of an outlier in the world of rosé these days, but emerging. So anyone? Okay, that's a resounding response. Very impressive. While folks are getting up the courage, Wendy, to talk about this wine, in your experience in Birmingham interacting with customers, What's the appetite for rosé that's made with Pinot Noir? You have any thoughts about that?
Well, I have to admit that this is my first New Zealand rosé that I can think of, and certainly New Zealand Pinot Noir rosé. I know I said earlier that it has more of a terroir or a tomato type thing, but I swear I get a little residual on the finish. So that's
Yeah,
an odd pairing there to taste more terroir and get the residual. But
yeah,
I guess most Pinot Noir rosés are, people think of Oregon, and they're
yeah,
hugely popular.
yeah,
And even
sure.
Burgundy rosés, we have some. So rosé in general over the last few years has been hugely popular.
Yeah,
And I don't think most people come in knowing which grape variety they want. They usually
yeah,
know
yeah.
Provence, but there are people looking for Pinot Noir, and yes, it's popular.
Yeah,
I-
and go ahead.
Oh, again, this is Janice, and to Scott and
Hey.
Wendy. I was just looking at the legs on this, because it was pretty interesting to me. But I'm also getting it, and maybe if everybody else's wine glass is kind of, I'm getting the legs, but it's also kind of beating up on the inside. Is it? Yeah, or use this too.
Yeah.
I just wondered, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the. I've had to put my glasses on. It's almost 14% alcohol. So they're letting these grapes ripen, and so that would absolutely explain why you're getting the legs in the glass, unlike because traditionally, rosé is alcohol is not the driver. These grapes are harvested young, even though they're look, just about every country in the world that makes red wine makes a version of rosé. So whether it's made with Cab or Merlot or Tempranillo or Sangiovese or Pinot Noir, the grapes are typically harvested earlier to retain that freshness and that bright acidity. And so as a result, during fermentation, the alcohol level usually stays around that 12.5 or 13%. But so you wouldn't really see a lot of the legs or that tears on the glasses. But it sounds like to me that, or at least judging by the bottle and the taste, that they've let these they've either harvested a little later, because they do have because of where they are in the southern hemisphere and the latitude standpoint, they have a ability to lengthen the ripening there. So they may just have grapes with a little more sugar when they come in to make the wine. That's a great observation.
Even more reason for me to like it.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely different. I mean, when I had this for the first time, I think I had this with like a goat cheese salad, and this and like spiced pecans, or like some pecans with cayenne pepper on it, and it was wonderful. I mean, you had the fresh goat cheese and a little bit of spice from the cayenne pepper of the pecans, and I mean, it was really delicious. But again, I think this would be good with some kind of seafood dish. I'm thinking about that crawfish pasta that was mentioned. Joe mentioned some of the charcuterie. I think it could stand up to some of that. But Wendy, to your point, I do think there's just a little bit of residual sugar on the back end. Not a bunch, but you can definitely feel it. Yeah.
And to Janice's comment, again, legs have to do with glycerin. And so, glycerin is really. And so, that supposedly slow moving legs show a higher alcohol content. And so they're very aesthetic, but maybe they don't take them quite as seriously as maybe what you get in the nose or on the palate. So
yeah, and I see that Joe just put in the group message that he has a burrata cheese on grilled bread. So man, I mean, you talk about everything firing there. You've got the bitter from the from the grill, and you've got that really wonderfully unctuous cheese and tanginess. I mean, that's where it's at.
Go Joe, that was good.
Yeah, he's got it going on. I think he's coming off of listen, don't let the smooth taste fool you. He did he's coming off of his own internet cocktail session yesterday, so he's just hanging back with a little wine tonight. But I'm seeing a few comments that this really is for a lot of folks their first time with a Pinot Noir rosé. And Janice, was that you that said this is Bunko Blush? I love that. This is what a great. I
it was
love
the
that.
one before. Well, really, it was talking about the white Zen.
Oh,
That
I
was
see.
the old
Oh
Bunko
gosh.
Blush.
Okay. Yeah, I call that
That's
like a
why
Bunko headache.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Scott, there was another thing I was going to say that I've always thought that rosé, this is going to sound so simplistic until you start thinking about it. But
Yeah.
the color of rosé, again, anywhere from the very, very pale blush to the salmon colors, it really goes with foods of that color.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Think of it, tomatoes, tomato salads, salmon,
Yeah.
shrimp,
Yeah.
all of those foods. It's great. And rosé in general also is fabulous with those difficult to pair with foods like
Yeah.
mussels and artichokes, and it kind of dumbs down the bitterness or maybe matches it in the middle and makes it marry together. So rosé,
Yeah, that's a great point.
yeah, such a wonderful place in food, that they're more than just summer drinking.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, I don't say this often, but since you brought it up, I mean, to me, I think about rosés kind of the same way I think about champagne. They can, you can pair those things from start to finish. And, it's, you don't think of that's, rosés not top of mind, but the way that rosés are created, inherent to the grapes and the method, they are terribly food friendly. They're great. But what I did want to go back to is, I showed that slide. Let me go back because I do want to make sure that that we don't miss this. But if I can get my presentation working here, yeah, you can tell that I've had more than one glass. Okay, down here on the slide where we talk about how rosé is made. That Pinot Noir was made with what's called limited maceration. So, and I want to make the distinction between that Provençal style that we had, which was very little skin contact, and compare that to that Pinot Noir and what we'll see in this next wine, this Spanish Rosado, which is what they do is they actually let that, they crush the grapes, and it can be the skins, sometimes it can be the seeds, the stems, it can be the entire must that stays in contact with the juice, can be up to several days. It's really predicated on what the winemaker wants to create in terms of color. But what I want you to know is, by and large, this is the most common way that rosé is made, is by controlling the maceration. And maceration, if you've ever macerated strawberries or cherries with sugar, it just means you kind of leave all of it together and let it kind of get familiar with each other. But that's how red wine is made, and that's how these rosés are made. Which, of course, you have those pigments in the red skin. More of them leach out into the juice, which provides more color. And as we'll see in this Garnacha, it also adds tannin, which gives complexity and more roundness in body and just some overall complexity to the wine. So just wanted you to know about the limited maceration. And then we'll talk about the last two, the saignée and the blending method after these wines, or after this, the Spanish Garnacha. But I did want to make sure that that everyone knew that. Okay. Any questions about the limited maceration method before we move on to the Rosado?
the skins on.
Okay. Well, this, if we started out with something that was very, very traditional and very delicate, now we're on the other end. The pendulum has swung to something that is much different. And you can just tell, I mean, you can look at the color. This to me is like I think of like a light ruby slipper almost, but it's definitely much deeper in color. And, if you've had Garnacha before, it's got that beautiful bright fruit. And this is, kind of that almost a, watered down, version of that color. But this color of that kind of the ruby color to me is just absolutely beautiful. And the reason that I think this wine is so fun and Spanish Rosado in general is Artadi, which is the winemaker, the wine house that makes this wine is really, I guess, primarily known, Wendy, I guess you probably know this as well on the retail side for their Riojas, but the winemaker has a property in Navarra, which is, just not, kind of a little southeast of Rioja. And this Artazuri is just to me, a wonderful expression of what happens when you take that beautiful Garnacha red grape and make it into a rosé. And this wine is made from vineyards that are relatively high elevation for Spain. And then, but actually, I'm going to hold off on that next comment because let's taste this because it's got some really unique aromas and flavors that's totally different than most, again, kind of on the other end of the spectrum from that Provençal style. I mean, to me, I get almost, in addition to the fruit, there's almost this creaminess and salinity to the nose. And I'm going to talk about why that probably is. But Wendy, I wanted to see if you experienced that and see if anyone else out there kind of had those same maybe thoughts about just smelling it.
I mean, sometimes
like
it sounds
brioche or like sweet dinner rolls or something to me.
Whoa. Well, sometimes when you smell it, you can get an idea of what the body is going to be. I mean, you can get that from the color because it's deeper color and a gorgeous color, but it smells like it's going to have more body to it.
Yeah.
Now, more of a cranberry, maybe not a high tone fruit, but more of a kind of a bitter fruit like cranberry.
Yeah.
But it does even smell like it's going to have that creaminess, but I absolutely agree with you on the palate. It's rounder. It is probably, we've gone from the most vibrant acidity to the least.
Yes.
Traded it out for that creamy, full, round palate. And I think more complex flavors too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, this is a more, again, I don't want to say a more serious wine, but it's definitely a wine that's made to do more things. I mean, this is not. You could certainly sit down at the Mediterranean and enjoy a glass on a warm summer day, but you can also have a phenomenal meal with this wine. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I will say, and I again would love to hear from some of you, but as soon as I took a sip, I immediately felt some soft tannins on my palate. And, those are the tannins that are coming from those skins. And you feel that little bit of astringency. Here it's pretty soft, but it gives you the ability from a food pairing standpoint to do a lot of really cool things with it. You still get that zing of acidity, but the body and that little bit of tannin really help to make it. It's a little bit heftier. It's kind of the Sears tough skin of rosé, I guess. They're like kind of the husky husky size. Yeah.
Love that. And it's as you may have said, 100% Garnacha, which is the same as Grenache in France.
Yeah.
But it's also old vine. And so old vine is just as it sounds. The older the vines, the less production, but the more concentration. I always liken that to people. Like, you know, when you're young, you're cute, you're simple, the older you get more complex, more interesting. And grapevines do the same thing.
That's right. Cheers to that. Cheers to that. Yeah. So I'm looking here. I got to stay up with some of these comments. I don't want to miss these because they're good comments and questions coming in. First and foremost, we've got people once again from all over, which is just cool, from Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and let's see. We've got a South African wine. Yeah, and Meryl, if you don't mind, if you're willing to unmute, is that a Rhone grape that's in that wine, or is it like a Pinotage, which is a kind of an indigenous grape to South Africa, or is it a Bordeaux grape? Because I know that in South Africa they use lots of different grapes.
I'm not real sure. I'm trying to read the bottle.
That's okay.
My husband brought it home to me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, just make one up then.
We couldn't find your wine. That's why I emailed, like, I had a Croatian rosé or I had this rosé.
Yeah. Well,
South Africa. Excellent. It's very dry. It's not too sweet. It's smooth. Oh my gosh, I think you could almost eat it even with red meat.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
He doesn't see what grape, but I put in my thing. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right. It's called. I typed the wrong thing first off. Sorry, but then secondly, I put it the right way. How do you pronounce that? Zinfandel?
Sure, that sounds fantastic. I don't. That sounds great.
I got it at Costco, so I don't know. Costco's pretty good at picking one.
In the future, you got to say it with confidence. Don't say it with a question mark. Say it with an exclamation point.
Very few legs.
Yeah,
There you go.
fantastic.
There's the Boston ale.
That's right. That's
very
right.
few legs in the glass. There's not much sugar in the nose of this glass.
Very good. Well, I do know, like New Zealand, South Africa, in terms of emerging markets, France, the US, Spain, Italy, those are the countries that produce the most rosé. But in terms of emerging countries for production, South Africa and New Zealand are definitely on the rise, and some great stuff coming out of South Africa. So cheers to you for picking that up. I know Goats du Rhum is another really kind of widely distributed. They make a lot of different Rhone style wines, but I know they do a rosé that's really terrific. So thanks for chiming in. Appreciate it. Any other thoughts about this one? About the Rosado?
I am loving it. Actually, I was quite timid at first. It was a much brighter red than I was expecting.
Yeah.
But I find it very enjoyable. And I was wondering, which one would you pair with a dessert? With
a dessert? Yeah. That's a great question. I think you could go either way. I think the natural instinct would probably be to lean toward the Pinot Noir, since it had a little bit of residual sugar. Because the thing about pairing wines with dessert is, if the dessert, and it also really depends on the dessert. If the dessert is too sweet, it'll absolutely steamroll the wine. All you'll taste is like acidulated water. It'll bury any of the fruit and the natural sweetness of the wine. So if you were going to have a dessert with any of these rosés, I would probably stick with some fresh fruit and maybe like a cheese that maybe had a little bit of sweetness to it. Not necessarily too sweet, but I think you just need to watch the sweetness of the dessert. But to me, the residual sugar in the Pinot Noir would be your best bet for making something that would work together. Looks like the Kenneys are enjoying Ghirardelli raspberry dark chocolate with their rosé. which sounds crazy good. There's your dessert right there. Is that Pinot Noir with some Ghirardelli chocolate? Lights out. Well done. Well done. Great suggestion. Yeah, thanks, Grace. Great question. And craisins, Nadine, I think I saw a comment from her a little bit earlier, but craisins, another kind of great match with some of these. You know, they have that same, you know, craisin, strawberries. Those are, you know, flavors that you would kind of naturally think of in rosé because they're things that you would get in real fresh, young, fruit-forward red wines like that are made with Grenache or Pinot Noir. So it's natural that you might experience some of those same things in the rosé. But all, man, great comments, great comments. Yeah.
Scott, I was going to say that reading about this rosé, they said the style is a term I'd never heard of before called vino di lacrima. And I've never taken Spanish, but
okay.
Grima, which means wine from tears.
Okay.
It says that it's juice that flows out of the press before any pressure is applied. In other words, the grape splits the skins and just sends the juice flowing. But I love that term, wine from tears.
Yeah. So it's just like the natural weight of the grape of the clusters crushing it, and then it's like a pachinko game, I guess. The water just, or the juice kind of just goes down, and what comes out at the bottom is that beautiful juice. Okay, so there's a question here about orange wine, and that's a perfect segue into the unrosé, I guess. But orange wine is you're seeing it kind of in some natural wine shops these days, but I think the truth is around orange wine is that in terms of wine production, people have been making, particularly in Central Europe, around in Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, they've been making orange wine for literally for thousands of years. It's one of the original ways that they made wine. And if you think about the way that we've talked about making rosé, where you take red grapes, you crush them, you keep them in contact with the juice, and you either you press it off, or which we didn't talk about, but the saignée method means to bleed off. They pump out some of the juice. Orange wine is taking that same philosophy but doing it with white grapes. So not all white wine is made from grapes that are perfectly green. Some grapes, like Pinot Gris, for example, has more of a golden brown skin. They really run the gamut from light yellow to dark green to brown and gray. And when you crush those grapes and you keep those white grape skins in contact with the juice, it's going to impart some pigment, hence the term orange. And it's also going to get some of those flavors and aromatics from the skins and the stems. They're going to leach into the juice. And so you get a white wine that has color to it. Sometimes they'll make a Vin Gris out of Pinot Gris, for example. But the orange wines are really the classic old time way of making wine, where they take green grapes, they crush them, they leave the skins in contact for 2 weeks, a month, it doesn't matter. And then what you get is a white wine that has a tint to it. And it's very polarizing. Not everyone loves it, but it's starting to gain some popularity. So if you see it, it's worth a try. It's an ancient wine, but it's really cool. And again, some of those examples from the Republic of Georgia are supposed to be phenomenal. I've never had one, but I'm starting to see more and more wine writers, comment on it these days. But great question. Thank you. Okay, so we're at that part of the show where it's 8 o'clock. We've been on for an hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm about to open up the phone lines. We're going to stick around, drink some wine, answer some questions. But for those of you who have to go, I want to say thank you. For those of you who can stay, I want to say please stay. We've still got, almost 100 people on. We'll keep going for another 2 hours if you want. I've got 3 bottles of wine here to drink. But just want to say thank you very much for being a part of tonight. Again, I want to remind all of you the virtual tip jar for Smile a Mile tonight. You can Venmo me at Jones is Thirsty on Venmo. All of those proceeds going over to the great folks at Smile a Mile. Again, want to say thank you for all that they're doing, and was just really great to have them as part of I know that there were some folks from Smile a Mile and certainly the great comments from Bruce tonight, but remember them, and also check back. We've got a couple of more wine events coming up. In 2 weeks, we have Desperately Seeking Chardonnay, and David Murfield, who is a renowned winemaker from Washington, will be our guest. And then 2 weeks after that, we have way down south in South America. We're going to look at reds from Chile and Argentina. So put those on your calendar. And if you follow me on social media, you'll see plenty of announcements about that. But the feedback up to this point is that many of you want to keep this going long after we're cut loose and can go about enjoying friends and restaurants on a Saturday night. We will keep looking at ways to integrate these virtual tastings. Okay, so Joseph was asking the date for the South American tasting. Let me just get to that slide and I will make sure, I hope you guys can see it. That's June 13th. So Desperately Seeking Chardonnay is on May 30th. And then Off the Beaten Glass will be on June 13th. So got some great wines lined up for that. And again, we're going to stick around. And this is a time when we can just start kind of answering some questions. Wendy, I hope you'll, if you're willing to stick around,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
Happy to. Sure.
Because I know I've got a number of questions here that I want to get to that folks have asked about. So anyway, before everyone kind of goes, I'd love to know if you'd be willing to share what was the favorite rosé of the night. You can answer in the group text if you want, or someone can just unmute themselves and shout it out. What was
the French one?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the first one.
This one.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yes, I thought it was fantastic.
Amazing.
Great. Oh yeah, Bert. So we've got it.
Anything to do with the fact that I love their Sauvignon Blanc? It must, right?
It may very well. That's a great one. It looks like we've got a lot. Well, we've got a good mix. We've got some of the, wow, we've got folks saying that the Pinot Noir, we've got a fistful of the Languedoc, and then some of the Spanish style. Very cool. Yeah, good.
Good. I like the fact there's a mix.
Very good. Well, a couple of questions here. Oh yeah, listen, Bruce, thank you for all that you guys do. And I'm so glad that you could be on the call tonight. And yeah, I look forward to continuing to support Smile a Mile through all of your efforts and through the fall. So thanks for being here. Absolutely appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a blast. We really appreciate it. A lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, hope you can stick around for a little bit longer. We're going to keep
Absolutely.
it kind of keep it rolling because we've got some questions here. And someone I think had been asking about malolactic fermentation and whether or not that happens in rosé. And that's a great question because, as Wendy and I were talking about, there's that creaminess, especially with that Spanish wine. But the fact is that all of these wines and most rosés in general do not go through malolactic fermentation. They like that acidity, and malolactic fermentation is they call it secondary fermentation, but it's really kind of a biological process that happens after primary fermentation. And what they do is they have this process softens the acidity in the wine. So malic acid is probably one of the primary acid compounds in wine. And so they convert the really sharp malic acid to a much softer acid, which is lactic acid. And that kind of shaves off the really harsh edges of the acidity, which in many table wines, you want that. You want there to be balance between the fruit and the acidity. In the case of the rosé, you want that heightened acidity. You want that freshness. And for those of you who think of really buttery Chardonnay, that comes from malolactic fermentation. That buttery aroma and flavor is one of the byproducts of malolactic fermentation. But the truth is that most red wines that you will drink have gone through malolactic fermentation. In fact, I bet that the vast majority, almost all of the red wines that you're drinking on a weekly basis have gone through malolactic fermentation. It's just that with the tannins and that kind of assertive fruit flavor, you're not tasting the kind of that buttery quality, but you're feeling it on the palate for sure. It's what it's what helps balance out those tannins and gives a softness and roundness to the acidity. But again, in rosé, they want that brightness, and so these don't go through malolactic fermentation. So a great question. Yeah. Looks like Scott and Suzanne are wanting to talk about that Côte de Rhône, the family, the Perron family. If for those of you who were on our discussion a while back for the Anything But Cab, we looked at their red blend from the Southern Rhône, and they're a family that's renowned for their really high-end Chateauneuf-du-Pape wines, but they also make some really wonderful kind of regional Rhône level blends with Grenache and Mourvedre and Syrah, and they also make a really delightful rosé. And Scott and Suzanne, if you guys would be willing to talk about that and see your experience, it's going to be probably more like a wine from Provence in terms of, you can just tell by the color that it's going to lean more toward that classic French style than it's leaning toward, the Spanish or Italian style. But if you're still on and you guys what do you think about this one?
Well, first of all, we just wanted to make sure that, some of us bought that one, I think, before it got changed over to the Spanish.
Yeah.
So just wanted to make sure that we had a little discussion about
Sure.
We haven't really focused on it because we haven't talked about it. So
yeah. But it's but again, it's it's indicative of that area. It's basically the same blend of grapes that you would find in that Côte de Roses. It's what
color
you find
looks kind
there.
of similar.
Yeah, and both in color, in acidity, in flavor, and actually, Scott, if you have the bottle, do you mind holding it up to the camera? And it's they'll make a white blend. They will do a red blend, and they also do a rosé. And these are widely available and really great, everyday wines. Great with food. This is one of those that we drink at our house a good bit, and great by the grill. Great with burgers. It's just a good summertime refreshing wine, much like that Côte de Roses from Gerard Bertrand. Very similar in style. Yeah. Glad you brought that up. Thank you. Let's see. We have we had a question here about grape must. Yeah, I'd mentioned grape must. So that's a great question. In the winemaking process, when they crush the grapes, sometimes they'll crush the grapes and leave it with the skin. Sometimes they'll add stems. They'll have the seeds in there. It'll just be this giant kind of gumbo of grape material. And that grape material, before it's pressed, is called the must. And that's where all the percolation's happening. It'll be together many times during fermentation. And that's where the flavors, a lot of the pigments, that's where all of that leaches out. And then they will press that off. And so when you think about them pressing the wine, it's a great way to think about it. If you've ever made French press coffee, the must is kind of the coffee grounds. When you press the coffee out, you get the coffee, and what's left, those coffee grounds, that's kind of what the grape must is. And again, it can be skins and stems, it can be whatever the winemaker wants to add, because even the stems can have some tannins and in many cases some flavors that they're looking to impart in the wine. So when you hear must, that's what that means. And then sometimes they take that must and they'll distill that into things like grappa. A lot of really high-powered after dinner drinks are made from grape must. So they don't let any product go to waste in any of those countries where they're making wine. So good question.
Scott, I have a question.
Yeah.
I often talk about this with the terroir.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why, but I pick up on this smell, and I call it barnyard for lack of anything else, and I can't get past it. So where does that come from?
Well, that's a great question. We have the barnyard talk in my house.
Okay.
We had it just a couple of weeks ago when we had some red wines.
Okay.
And on Friday nights I do a wine tasting with Ed Finch, who is the owner of Finch Fine Wines, and we did a Bordeaux tasting a few weeks ago, and we looked at Bordeaux's from the left bank and the right bank. And again, we were talking about that barnyard, that earthiness. And it can come from a number of ways, a number of places. It can just be part of the terroir where during the, where they're thinking about the grapes being less fruit forward and having more of that earthy quality. It can be a little bit of what's called Brett, which can add, sometimes it's too much can be thought of as a fault. A little bit can be thought of as kind of really wonderful French Bordeaux. But yeah, it's very much, it's a hot topic that it can be debated and beaten up until everyone's got just a big old bruises on their face, because some people love it and think it's a really a sign of quality and kind of the old world style of winemaking. You really don't find that in new world wine styles where you have more ripeness, more freshness, less about those earthy vegetal components to the wine. Wendy, feel free to add, but it's something that comes up often in tastings with Cab and Merlot for sure.
You're on it. That is, I mean, there's earthy where it's leathery, or as a famous restaurateur in our town called it, sweaty saddle leather.
Yeah, which we've all experienced, of course, right?
Right, exactly. But then there is Brett, as he was talking about, and a little bit of Brett, and the famous importer Kermit Lynch said a little bit of Brett can be nuances, complexity, but a lot of Brett comes across as horsey, over-yardy.
Right.
So, it's all in the degree there. So
Yeah. So, you kind of, I don't know. I think most people either like it or they don't like it, but you're bound to find that quality in particularly in Bordeaux from kind of old line, very traditional chateau. Maybe not with the young producers on the right bank that are kind of experimenting outside of the traditional chateau method. So maybe in Pomerol or Saint-Emilion, where they're kind of fooling around with things a little bit differently. But definitely over on the left bank, that's going to be, probably part and parcel of a lot of those classic chateaus there. But great question.
And then I began several decades ago and in the wine business, and the one wine we all used to talk about was Bandol. And
Yes.
I think back in the day, it is Brett, and it's in line. It's really interesting, but there were some examples back then that were maybe a little bit too much
A little too funky.
Can you spell Brett for me, please? Will you spell that, Brett?
It's Brettanomycin. It's a word that's about that long, about 35 letters.
Okay.
But just Google Brett, Brett, and you'll learn all you want to know.
Okay.
Yeah,
just like a Brett you would know. So okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But it's all about barnyard. But worth learning about, because it's you smell it, and as soon as you know it, you'll identify it over and over again. Yeah.
It's like a wet mop or laundry that you forgot about in your washer.
Yeah.
A little bit of moldiness. But the odd thing about Brett is that's the worst case of it. Unfortunately, Brett can, if there's a little bit of Brett, and they always kid that you can't be a little bit pregnant, but if there's a little bit of Brett, what it'll do is strip the wine. And so you have no flavor, no nose. And you're like, why did they recommend this to me? So there are different levels of Brett. But if you suspect, if somebody really highly recommended something to you, and you go home and you get, especially the moldy or wet mop thing, or even a stripped wine, you should go, maybe there's something wrong with this wine, and take it back to your retail.
Okay. Or maybe, can you just kind of wait a minute and get past it?
Well, you could always put it in a slow cooker with a roast and make a nice beef stew out of it. I don't know.
Okay. Because most of the time I have to go barnyard, can't do it. Okay.
Yeah.
There are a few occasions you can do that, and then that gets more detailed. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm looking at a question here about the growth or rosé sales in the next coming years. Wendy, that would be something for you to take. But what I do know is just in preparing for tonight, I looked at some of the wine sales data, and as a category, rosé is the fastest growing category in the wine, in any of the wine segments, and year over year, it's been growing at 40%. So it's still lagging behind, the Chardonnays and Cabs of the world, but it's growing by leaps and bounds. I mean, it really is. People are really finding that it's a great value, and it's an easy, it's very approachable. So what are you seeing on the retail side?
I was going to say, I think both Languedoc and Navarra give the facts that their areas used to be a bunch of Rosé Blanc. In other words, the cheap stuff, and they are changing over the vineyards to more quality, more ancient vines, more interesting wines. I didn't look up those stats, but that's fascinating. I can't see that it would be other than that. Absolutely through the roof. People coming in, and most people now do know that rosés are dry. And otherwise you can tell them that, but the rosé, and if you can start to tell them it's not just for summer patio. I mean, one of the biggest rosé seasons to me that doesn't seem natural is Thanksgiving. And if you
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
and all the different dishes there, it's always interesting and a challenge to find your favorite wines for Thanksgiving. But to me, rosé is absolutely it. So I agree. It's going to keep growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, I would say candidly, without naming names, Jay Oglesby is on this call, and I can tell you, we have started many a fall winter celebratory meal with rosés, and that would then lead into more full-bodied reds. But I'm telling you, again, if you think about, you go to a big festive setting, you've got everything from a pimento cheese dip to sweet potato casserole to you name it. I mean, rosé is just, it kind of moves and grooves with all of those flavors and textures at the table. And, it's fun to drink. It's relatively low in alcohol. It's refreshing, and it just makes people happy. And so, the other part of that year-over-year growth, Wendy, you hit on exactly that same Wine Business Journal 2019 report that had the 40% year-over-year growth. Also said that that is absolutely starting to extend outside of that kind of May start to August, that it's a year-round beverage. We just don't, it's not advertised that way from a marketing standpoint. You don't see these winemakers leveraging that during cooler months, but consumers are absolutely enjoying rosé year-round, no question. Yeah,
it's one of the perfect, like we were talking about earlier. I mean, it works with difficult foods like asparagus and broccoli. Another thing is that, okay, you can see the acidity and brightness of a rosé and the acidity and brightness of like a tomato salad or something, right? Like, but the other thing that it can do is you have the little bit more weight from being from red grapes and the acidity. And what that can do is the opposite pairing. If you'll go against something that's hot, fiery, so think of anything grilled. So you have the spice and the weight of that, and then you have a rosé that has enough brightness and yet enough weight from the color, and they're perfect to, the one is the foil to the other one. So it's a great way to pair rosés.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's not only complementing, but it's also picking up the contrast. You're exactly right. And Joe asked another question about whether that jumps over into sparkling rosé. The report that I read from the Wine Business Journal really talked about still wines, but I do know that at least for me, from a food pairing standpoint, anytime I do big wine dinners, I always start with a rosé sparkling wine. I think they're phenomenal with food for all it's like the best of both worlds. You've got a rosé and bubbles, it's different than like a Blanc de Noir, which is still a light champagne or sparkling wine that's made with all Pinot Noir, but has no skin contact. A rosé sparkling wine is going to have some color to it. It's going to have expression of more of that red fruit, as opposed to that very austere, very crisp, green, Granny Smith apple kind of flavor profile. And I don't know about y'all, but if you've ever had a rosé sparkling wine, it's like listening to banjo music. You can't be sad and listen to the banjo. You can't be sad and drink rosé sparkling wine. Like it's impossible. It just doesn't. They can't exist together. I've never seen anyone, even if they don't like sparkling wine, not have a visceral, happy reaction to that beautiful flute of rosé sparkling wine. I just think it's still one of the underappreciated beverages. And I'm telling you right now, for those of you who want to learn more, there are some wonderful cavas out on the market that are made in a rosé style that are really easy on the wallet. They're made in the traditional champagne method. I love wines from Carneros, Domaine Chandon. They make a fantastic rosé sparkling wine. They're just, I'm telling you, you can do a lot with some sparkling rosé for sure. Yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay. I'm about talked out now. Someone else. What else? Any more questions? We're kind of in magic hour now, so feel free to unmute yourselves and talk amongst yourselves. And we still have quite a number of people on here, so I'd love to hear from you here. Just like say hello. Let me know where you're from. Let me know what you're enjoying right now. We'd just love to hear from you.
Hey, so we were talking about the sale of rosé. I'm in the selling rosé and how it has like had a sharp increase in the past few years. You see the same thing for sparkling rosé, especially like Spanish rosé and stuff like that?
I do. I think, and Wendy, you can speak to that, but I think that between Garnacha and Tempranillo, I think both of those grapes, not only do they make wonderful red wines, but I think they are really perfect for making rosés, both with a little bit of effervescence and still wines.
Yeah.
Wendy, feel free to jump in there.
No, I agree. Like you said earlier, the Spanish Cava rosés, we have a Navarran.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
It's incredible. And it's like mid-teens. Loire Valley has a lot of wonderful sparkling rosés. They tend to be a little more elegant. Bourgogne has sparkling.
Yeah.
So Alsace has sparkling rosé, and they're all really affordable, like $25 and under. So yeah, please go out and explore them. And
Navarran Cava is always sold out wherever, anywhere you ask in Oxford, Mississippi.
Yeah.
There's always just like working in a restaurant that sells it. Now there's been such a demand that
for sure.
You can't get it really anywhere else, which is great for us.
Yeah. I will say this, and Wendy, you can close your ears, but or don't tell Ed. But I'm telling you right now, World Market has a great selection of Cava rosé. They're mass made, but sometimes during the holidays you can go to World Market and just get that stuff by the case. But you're not going to have the more refined. It's not that they're any more expensive, but those kind of small producers that you're going to get at the wine store, or you're going to get at your local wine store. The Rosé Cava is just delicious. It really is. Yeah.
Okay, Scott, you opened that door, so allow me to walk through it. We do have a small wine store, and again, those out of state don't apply. But what we do is we have maybe 300 wines in the store, and we work with all 6 distributors, and we can get any distributor has. So just because we don't have it in the store tonight doesn't mean we can't get it. So there are things out there. There are probably 20,000 or more wines that we can get, and so anything that's at a local distributor is
and it's what I will say candidly, that one of the things I love about shopping for wine at Finch is that I can shop from my couch, because you can order everything online and look at their catalog of 3,000 plus wines and press a button, and you just drive up and they put it in your car for you. It's or if you're like Jay, I can go by the wine store and he can call me and say, hey man, can you pick up my wine too? And he can call ahead and I can do double duty. But they really do have a great, Wendy, truly it is really cool the way that you can explore that catalog of wines and be able to kind of mix and match whether you want 2 bottles or a half case or a full case. That's
Well,
pretty cool.
I think the trend in retail in general is having a smaller footprint in brick and mortar, and yet allowing the customers to shop and find what they like. It just seems to be the retail model these days. So that's what we try to do, and we that's what we really kind of suggest, and that is our footprint. That you know, we want to get anything that we can that's in town. We just may not have it in the shop tonight. So as long as you can think 2-3 days ahead of time, we are your friends.
That's right. And the other retail model I know is one that was employed by, I don't know, I've got some friends, Tom Hodge and James Brady. I don't know if they're on the call, but Tom was having some trouble finding a couple of the wines down at a wine store in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and just FaceTime me while I was at work on another conference call, which was really kind of cool because I just kind of muted that Zoom and picked up my phone, and he was there, and we kind of looked at some of the other choices in the wine store, which was really kind of cool to see, you know, what the wine selection was and at this great wine shop in Hattiesburg. So that's also another kind of fun way to buy wine. But it's this whole COVID thing has really changed the way that folks are interacting with wine and spirits. It's really really strange. And some of those things are good. I hope that they stick around, that ability to, you know, kind of have curbside pickup and, you know, some of those kind of neat customer service things that are happening now. All right, anything else? I've still got some wine.
May we ask non-rosé questions?
What's that?
Can we ask non-rosé questions?
Of course. Ask anything. Ask away. Yes.
So the last one, Jones's Thursday I was able to participate in was anything but Chardonnay. We did Pinot Gris, Vino Verde. So how do you see just personally, because I work in the business of selling booze to people.
Sure.
Where do you see the wine sales going in the next few years? Like, what do you think is going to be big? What's going to probably fall flat? What's going to be the overarching theme for wine in the next few years?
Yeah, boy, that's a good one. You know, it's going to be I would say that based on what I follow, you know, I don't really know a whole lot about what's happening on the retail side, but I spend a lot of time down in the weeds of the wine business on the just the hardcore business side, and I follow the analyst at Rabobank who have every 2 weeks they put out a podcast that goes really deep into the wine business. And so I've been following those guys for a couple of years. And one thing that's becoming abundantly clear is that millennials are drinking less, and have very discerning palates. They are slow to come around to wine. They're not opposed to it, but you know, they're got to find a way to stay relevant to younger consumers. But to your point, Joe, they are the ones who are most likely to try, you know, kind of off the beaten path varietals like Pinot Gris, or a region like Vino Verde, which has some history, has a story, particularly if the wines are made in an organic, biodynamic a way where there's a stewardship story about the connection of the wine to the region, what they're not warming up to are big mass-produced labels. And so it's an interesting time. I think there's a lot of room for it, but I think that what the real connection point is going to be doing alcohol and bar programs like you're doing, and doing the kind of hand-to-hand combat that folks like Wendy are doing, where there's a chance to educate and not just assume that someone's going to drink this because I put it on the menu and I told you. They want to understand, like anything else, whether they want to know where their chicken comes from or their whatever they buy, they're wanting to know what it's all about. And I think that the winemakers that can get hip to that and understand that and do it in a way that's very genuine, that's where you'll find that. So I think it's it kind of transcends the varietal and really is more about the actual story of the people making the wine, is the way that I see it. And that's at least what I'm hearing on the business side, is the folks that are making inroads with that younger group of consumers are the ones that are making high quality wines, but also have a story and are doing it with a sense of conviction. But Wendy, feel free to jump in there.
No. I think that that's fascinating. Everything you said is great. I mean, at our store, we have all age levels. We have, again, in the neighborhood we are, maybe they're a little more adventurous. So, I have people coming in and says, they go to our alternative white section. We go, tell me about these. What are these?
Yeah.
They are willing to explore. I think you nailed it there. So.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I, watching as someone who is younger, and watching like how the wine region and how the wine world works, young people drinking younger wines. No one took wine anymore, like
that's right.
Why would 30 years drink a bottle of wine and drink it now or drink it 2 years from now? It's like you're going to drinking younger and younger instead of older and older, like the 80s and 90s, as opposed to now. Which a sign of the times, right? Like there's no more like you don't see as many like big Cabernet, those big cabs and those big like Barolos on menus anymore, because it's like why have an 85 this when you can have like a 2012 of this with me and my friends. It's cool watching like the wine world kind of develop that way when it comes to like the younger people actually having an input on something when it comes to the wine.
I would agree. And when Sherry Morano was on the last tasting, I mean, she actually made a comment about even some of this legacy producers are now starting to produce wines in a style that's more accessible now, and that not everything has to be, I mean, there's always going to be a market for wine that's meant to be aged. But to your point, it's more about wines that are ready to drink now, that are fun, that are a value. But, look, if Jay's still on this call, I remember when we had a graduation dinner at St. Leo, and we had multiple bottles of that Pet Nat. It was fantastic, and we drank it, and it was fantastic. And like, I mean, it's kind of hip, and it's whatever. I mean, but it was. We enjoyed it. Everyone at every age group, even the grandparents, loved it. It was fresh. It was great with food. And it was, I mean, I think that embodies the spirit of where a lot of winemakers are these days. It's and like anything else, if you want to stay relevant, you're going to have to meet the consumer where they are. And there are a lot, we're not that I'm going to stop drinking wine, but I'm on that part of the spectrum. My kids and a lot of that younger generation who are interested in wine, but they also, they don't want it to be fussy and they want to learn, they want it to be high quality, but they also want it to be easy to drink, great with food, and something that is not going to require them to have a PhD in enology to understand or appreciate.
Exactly.
They're not big barnyard. They're not big barnyard fans, Janice. They like kind of fresh, fruit, young. To your point, Joe, more young, fruit-forward wines. Good, fresh, balanced wines.
Yeah, and it's something I noticed as someone who works in a bar with, in a relatively young clientele. It also has a lot of older clientele come in about, bigger, huger, they want those big, robust, heavy cabs, as opposed to younger people. Like, I want them to like lighter, brighter, dances a little bit more, things like that. So I noticed it when the Rosé we had first one about like the lighter, brighter dances on the tongue, as opposed to like those heavier, richer flavors like my father, like my, the older generation, as you say, likes, and when it comes to wine and roses and things like that. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Wendy, I remember that, when you said it almost danced on your tongue. I mean, I think that kind of sums the whole thing up. You want it to be fun, and not everything has to be over the top celebratory, but I do think that young, fresh wines that can be enjoyed within a year or two of the vintage date is probably more of the trend than, buying a wine and knowing that you got to, put it in your cellar for 10 years. Yeah.
I truly see that in retail, that it really is kind of the older generation. Yeah, I know I'm part of it, but being a retailer, maybe not as much. And maybe the older generation is still into the things you put back in your cellar and hold.
Yeah.
And certainly younger are looking for tonight. So they'll put a mixed case together, but they're going to drink it in the next 2 weeks. So that's it. I am going to have to bid you all adieu. Scott, thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's see. Let me unmute everyone if I can, and so we can at least say thank you, Wendy. Or if you guys will unmute and at least let's give Wendy a hand. Raise a toast to you. Thank you very much, Wendy. Very much appreciate it.
This has been a treat to be on tonight. Thank you very much, Scott.
Yeah, well, good. We'll keep the party rolling as long as folks want to stick around.
You keep it going and have a great night and a weekend. Thank you, guys.
Okay, Terry. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate you joining.
Yeah, Wendy. This is Wendy. This is Terry.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Wendy. Appreciate it.
Wendy.